It was a cold, quiet evening when Barron Trump sat in his study, staring out the window at the bustling city below. He had been through many things in his young life, luxury, fame, and privilege, but none of it had prepared him for the moment he was about to face. In a nearby hospital, an elderly woman named Ellen lay in her bed, frail and weak, her body ravaged by cancer. She had lived a full life, but now she was at the end of her journey. The doctors had given her a short time to live, and every day felt like a gift. But there was one thing, one final wish that haunted her heart. Ellen had a son, David, whom she had raised with love and dedication. But over the years, their relationship had soured. He had grown angry with her, blaming her for the struggles he faced in life. Arguments had torn them apart, and finally, David had walked out of her life for good. Ellen had tried reaching out, but his bitterness kept him away. She hadn't seen him in years. Now, on her deathbed, Ellen's heart ached for one thing more than anything else: to see her son one last time, to apologize, to mend the wounds, and to tell him that despite everything, she loved him. But she knew the chances were slim. David was stubborn, angry, and far away, physically and emotionally. Barron Trump's life had been a whirlwind of events, but he was no stranger to heartache. He had seen the impact of loss, regret, and family struggles. That's why, when he received a letter from a hospital worker telling him about Ellen's situation, he couldn't ignore it. The letter spoke of her dying wish and the pain of a son lost to anger and pride. Barron couldn't help but feel for her. He knew what it was like to feel disconnected from someone you love. He couldn't bear the thought of someone leaving this world with regret, without closure, without love. He immediately made the decision to help. Barron arrived at the hospital the next day, a calm determination in his eyes. He was not just a businessman, not just a celebrity. Today, he was someone who could offer the most precious gift of all: compassion. Ellen was lying in her hospital bed when Barron entered the room. She looked up, surprised to see a young man standing in front of her. He was tall, with an air of confidence that was tempered by genuine kindness. He smiled softly, sitting beside her bed. "Mrs. Ellen," Barron said quietly, "I'm Barron Trump. I've come to help fulfill your wish." Her eyes widened, confusion flickering in her tired gaze. "My wish?" she whispered hoarsely, her voice barely audible. "Yes," Barron continued, his tone gentle. "I know you've been trying to reach your son. I'm here to help make that happen. I want to bring David to you, to give you that moment of peace." Tears welled up in Ellen's eyes as she looked at Barron, disbelief and gratitude mingling in her expression. How can you do that?" she asked, her voice cracking. Barron took a deep breath. "I'll reach out to him. I'll tell him that you want to see him, no matter what's happened between you two. You deserve that closure. You deserve to have peace before you go." Ellen's eyes shimmered with tears, but she nodded slowly, unable to speak. She couldn't believe someone, a stranger no less, would offer such a gift. Barron stood up, his face filled with quiet resolve. "I'll do whatever it takes." The next day, Barron began his search for David. He didn't know where to start, but he refused to give up. He called contacts, reached out to mutual acquaintances, and searched through social media, determined to find the angry son who had turned his back on his mother. Hours turned into days, and Barron's persistence never wavered. He could sense the urgency in Ellen's voice, the desperation in her eyes. She was running out of time, and he couldn't let her die without seeing her son one last time. Finally, after days of relentless searching, Barron found him. David was living in a small apartment on the outskirts of the city, a shadow of the man he could have been. He was rough around the edges, angry and broken. When Barron knocked on his door, David opened it with a frown, expecting trouble. "What do you want?" David asked coldly, not recognizing Barron. "I'm here for your mother," Barron said, his voice steady. "She's dying, and she wants to see you. She wants to apologize, and she wants you to know she loves you. Please, David. She doesn't have much time left." David's face hardened. "I've got nothing to say to her. She pushed me away, and I'm better off without her." Barron didn't give up. "I understand your pain, but this isn't just about you. It's about her. It's about making peace before it's too late. Don't let regret be the last thing you feel. Come to her. For her." David stood there for a long moment, the anger still bubbling beneath the surface. But something in Barron's eyes made him pause. The young man wasn't just talking. He was pleading, urging him to do the right thing. Finally, David let out a long, frustrated sigh. "Fine, I'll go, but this doesn't mean anything." Barron nodded, his heart swelling with hope. That's all she wants. Just a chance to say goodbye. When David walked into the hospital room, Ellen was lying there, frail and weak. Her breath came in shallow gasps, her once vibrant face now marked by the ravages of illness. But when she saw her son standing in the doorway, something shifted in her eyes. David stood there, hesitant, unsure. He was angry, confused, but as he looked at the woman who had given him life, something in his heart began to crack. He stepped forward slowly, his steps heavy with regret. Ellen reached out a trembling hand. "David, my son," she whispered, her voice barely a sound. "I'm sorry for everything. I never meant to hurt you. Please know I love you no matter what." Tears welled up in David's eyes as he looked down at his mother, the weight of his anger and pride slowly dissolving in the face of her love. He took her hand, holding it tightly, the floodgates opening. "I'm sorry, Mom," David choked out. "I was so angry. I didn't understand. I should have come back sooner. I know, sweetheart," Ellen interrupted softly. "You don't have to apologize. I know you've been hurt, but I wanted to see you one last time, to tell you I'm proud of you, and that I love you more than you'll ever know." David's sobs came more freely now, the dam that had held his pain back for so long crumbling with every word his mother spoke. He had wanted to say so many things to her, but in that moment, all he could manage was his silent tears, the pain in his chest manifesting through his shaking shoulders. Ellen smiled weakly, her hand still clasped in David's. The warmth of his hand brought her comfort, and she felt a peace wash over her. For so long, she had hoped for this moment, praying that somehow they would find their way back to each other. "I'm so sorry, Mom," David whispered again, his voice breaking. "For everything. I don't even know where to begin. But I should have been here for you. I should have listened to you, understood you. I was just too angry. I was too proud." Ellen lifted her frail hand, brushing the hair from David's forehead in a gesture that felt like it came from a time long ago, a time when he was her little boy, the one she held in her arms, who relied on her for comfort and safety. "You were never the problem, David," she said, her voice filled with tenderness. "I was too. I made mistakes too. We both did. But that doesn't mean I stopped loving you. I never did." David's heart broke into a million pieces as he looked down at his mother. Her frailty, her age, her sickness. It made everything he'd been through seem so small, so insignificant. It wasn't about the years of pain, the arguments, or the distance between them. It was about the love they had shared, the love that could never be erased, no matter how many misunderstandings had occurred. Tears continued to fall from his eyes, but they were no longer filled with anger. They were tears of sorrow, of regret, but also of relief. For the first time in years, he felt like he could breathe again. The weight that had been crushing him, the anger that had kept him distant, was slowly dissolving, replaced by a profound sense of gratitude and understanding. Ellen's eyes, once clouded with worry and pain, now shone with peace. "I wanted to see you one last time because I wanted to make sure you knew how much you meant to me," she whispered. "I want you to remember the good times we shared, the love we had. Please don't hold on to the past. Let go of the pain, my dear. You have so much to live for." David nodded silently, his heart aching, but slowly, surely, he could feel the anger and resentment that had once consumed him fading away. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't something that could be fixed in a single conversation. But in that moment, he knew he had to try, to honor his mother's last wish. For a long while, neither of them spoke. The room was filled only with the sound of Ellen's shallow breathing and the quiet sobs of David, his face buried in her hand, not wanting to let go. Time seemed to stand still, as if the world outside the hospital room didn't matter anymore. There was only this moment, this incredible healing moment between a mother and her son. Finally, Ellen broke the silence. "David, I want you to live your life. Don't live in the past. Don't let my death be the reason you hold on to your pain. There's so much waiting for you, so much love still out there. I want you to find happiness. I want you to make peace with yourself." David looked up at her, his voice shaking. "I will, Mom. I promise you." Ellen smiled, the faintest of smiles, one that spoke of unconditional love. "I believe you, sweetheart." Barron stood quietly in the doorway, watching the two of them. He hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but he couldn't help but listen to the conversation. It was a deeply intimate moment, one that touched him in ways he hadn't expected. It was so raw, so real, and despite the pain, it was beautiful. He had always known the power of family, of forgiveness, but seeing it unfold right before him, how a dying mother's love could pierce through the walls of anger and regret, how a son could find his way back to her after all these years, it was something he would never forget. He knew it wasn't his place to interrupt their reunion, so he silently turned and left the room, giving them the privacy they needed. But as he walked down the hall, his heart was heavy, but full. The world could be cruel, unfair, and cold, but moments like this was what made it worth it. The power of love, the power of forgiveness. It was something that could heal the deepest of wounds. Days passed, and Ellen's condition worsened, but the bond between her and David remained strong. He had stayed by her side every day since their conversation, helping her with whatever she needed. He was there, not out of obligation, but out of love. For the first time in years, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. It wasn't long before the inevitable came. Ellen passed away, surrounded by the people she loved, her son, her family, and the man who had made it possible for her to say goodbye. David stood by her bedside, holding her hand until the very end. He wasn't the same person he had been when he walked into that hospital room. He had let go of his anger, his bitterness, and in return, he had found a new sense of peace. He had found closure. When the nurses came to take Ellen's body, David stayed behind for a moment, just looking at her. The woman who had given him life, who had loved him unconditionally. He kissed her forehead one last time, whispering words he hadn't spoken in years. "I love you, Mom." Barron, who had been keeping his distance, approached David once he had left the room. The young man looked exhausted, his eyes red from the tears he'd shed, but there was something different about him now. He was lighter, as if a great burden had been lifted from his shoulders. "David," Barron said softly, his voice respectful, "I just wanted to say, I'm really glad I could help. I know it doesn't change everything, but I hope it brings you some peace." David nodded, wiping his eyes. "Thank you, Barron. I don't know how to repay you for what you've done. You gave me back something I thought I'd lost forever." Barron smiled, a small but genuine smile. "You don't have to repay me. You've repaid me with your courage, your willingness to heal. That's more than enough." David looked at Barron, his voice thick with emotion. "I didn't understand the value of family, of forgiveness, until it was almost too late. You've given me something priceless, Barron." Barron nodded, feeling a sense of fulfillment that he hadn't anticipated. "Sometimes, all we need is one person to show us the way. You found your path. Your mother would be proud." David gave Barron a heartfelt thank you before walking down the hall to make the necessary arrangements. Barron stayed behind for a moment, reflecting on what he had witnessed. It had been more than just a simple act of kindness. It had been a moment that changed everything, a life, a family, and a legacy of healing. In the years that followed, David did exactly what his mother had asked him to do. He lived his life, free from the chains of anger and regret. He found a renewed sense of purpose, became involved in charity work, and rebuilt his relationships, not just with his mother's memory, but with others who needed healing as well. Barron, too, carried the memory of that moment with him. It served as a reminder of how important it was to reach out to those who needed help, to offer kindness when it was least expected, and to never underestimate the power of love and forgiveness. And that's how one simple act of kindness helped a mother and son heal the wounds of the past, bringing them together in a way neither of them could have imagined. It's a powerful reminder that love and forgiveness can change everything, even in the darkest of times. As Barron Trump showed us, sometimes it's the smallest gestures that have the biggest impact on someone's life. So next time you're faced with a moment where you can make a difference, remember this story and consider how your actions could bring light to someone's world. After all, we all have the power to heal, to forgive, and to make a lasting impact on those we care about. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, subscribe for more heartwarming tales, and share it with your friends. Let's spread the message that no matter the challenges, love and kindness can truly change the world. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.